Happy Friday, everyone. It has been a long week, but yet we are here. As always, this has been our new tradition here at the Angela Ray Show. Whenever you get on the broadcast, go ahead and chime into the comments. Let me know where you are listening in from. Shout out to everyone who will be catching our broadcast tonight on the replay. I know that 8 o'clock on a Friday night, with states reopening around the country, many of you are venturing out to restaurants and partaking in some Friday activities outside of the home. So thank you all to everyone who will be checking this out again on the replay. And we're going to just hang tight just for a minute, let some individuals get onto the broadcast. Then we're going to get started with our Ray of Motivation moment before I introduce my special guest for tonight. Hey, E from Atlanta, welcome. Hey, Diane Gamble, I know that you are listening in from Vietnam. Are you still the president of my little club, Diane? We got to talk about that. Oh, someone else is chiming on as well. Again, welcome to this Friday edition of the Angela Ray Show. We're going to go ahead and get started with our Ray of Motivation moment. So, for this Friday edition of the Ray of Motivation moment, I just want to challenge you to embrace the pivot. Embrace the pivot. You know, we are in an unprecedented time in our country, and not just in the United States, but actually in our world. And so many things are changing actually on a daily basis. And one of the things that I have noticed, particularly from small business owners who are doing relatively well in this time, especially those that are not essential, is that they are embracing the pivot. You know, like many of you who probably have plans throughout the summer that may be changing a little bit. One of the things that I was looking forward to this summer was my family reunion. We haven't been able to get together for the past 2 years, and we were really excited about the plans that we had this summer. But with the challenges of COVID, not just in potential infections, but also family members who may be impacted financially from this pandemic, we decided that we were going to postpone the reunion schedule for this year until 2021. However, one of the things that we have embraced is using technology. While we all can't be together physically, we have taken technology and implored that so that we can have family prayer calls, so that we can get together on Zoom and see who's done their hair and who hasn't. But it's actually been an amazing, amazing gift. Would we much rather be in person and sampling my mother's potato salad? Absolutely. We would much rather do that, but we have decided to embrace what is going on now and moving along with what we have during this pandemic. So, again, for our Ray of Motivation moment this Friday evening, I would just like to challenge you to embrace the pivot. So, I'm very excited about our guest for tonight. I think it's very fitting. Hey, Joanne, thank you so much for being on the broadcast tonight. I think it's very fitting that this particular filmmaker is not only our final one in this series on Women Behind the Lens, but I think it's fitting that her work, that we're going to be talking about her work and specifically the type of work she does, the genre, and how she basically speaks to us through film based on everything that's happening in our country right now. Deborah Riley Draper is an award winning documentary filmmaker. Her first film that came out in the early 2011, 2012, won a documentary award. It was Versailles 73. And since then, she has gone on to make short films, documentary films, and she has some very special projects in the work, which I can't wait for her to share with us. So, everybody, please help me welcome Deborah. Deborah, so excited to have you on the broadcast tonight.
Oh my gosh, Angela, thank you for having me on the podcast. And by the way, you look amazing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, fantastic.
This pandemic, COVID, all this stuff, it's been hard. My lashes are not like they normally are, but we're making it do what it do.
Have any on? I'm sporting my COVID fro, the CV-19 fro, and and no
And it
lashes.
looks
But
wonderful.
thank you. What's most important is that I get to spend my Friday evening with you, and we get to talk about film. We get to talk about what's actually happening and how these events actually inspire me to do films. Because of the films that I've done, 3 of them have been inspired by things that actually happened. Right, the things that really were dismissed or not necessarily embraced by media. So I wanted to embrace those and really tell the story in film. So I'm ready for whatever questions you have. Ready to jump in.
So yeah, okay, so before we get started on the kind of the questions that we went over, I want you to share a little bit about your journey of becoming a filmmaker, because your background is advertising. So how did you make that journey from, a very successful advertising veteran to making documentary films?
Absolutely. So, I spent over a decade and a half as an advertising executive. So I worked at Burrell, I worked at BBDO for almost 10 years. I worked at Ogilvy as well. I worked on Coke, AT&T, FedEx as an account person. And as a strategist. But inside, Angela, I think there was a creative. I know there was a creative. There was a person who wanted to tell the stories that weren't being told, and doing all of that brand work, working on all these blue chip brands, sitting on the commercial sets, working with the creative directors. I was like, I want to tell something else. I want to tell some different stories.
Mm.
I want to tell stories that go a little bit deeper about people and places and communities that you don't ordinarily see. And plus, I kept raising my hand to direct a commercial the whole time I was in the advertising agency business, and every single time the answer was no. So, and
Mm.
it was great that the answer was no, because the answer was no. I said, I'm going to show you. And I was listening to NPR one day, and I heard the story of these 12 amazing Black women who modeled at Versailles in 1973 and changed fashion. And I said, why don't I know that story? I think the world should know that story. Beth Ann Hardison was one of those women, Kadeem Hardison's mother. So I went about deciding that I'm going to make my first film, and this is going to be the subject of my first film, the Black women who stormed Versailles and changed fashion forever. So Versailles 73 was born out of the frustration of wanting to direct a commercial and wanting to tell stories, and thinking the natural transition, since I worked at an ad agency, would be to direct a commercial. And that didn't happen. So I gave myself the permission and not waited for not one person to say, go ahead, after I've been turned down so many times. And I did it, and I shot my first film. It premiered at the Marché du Film in Cannes in 2012. Women's Wear Daily wrote about it. The New York Times wrote about it. It was picked up by Viacom, and it aired on the Logo channel right after RuPaul's Drag Race. So it was very exciting for that first film coming out the gate to have such a glowing review in the New York Times, to be bought by Viacom, and to have a promo by RuPaul coming right after Drag Race. So that was fun. But that's how I got into the business. I've been working for years on commercials, telling brand stories, commercial production, social media, laying out multi-million-dollar marketing communication plans for brands. So I'm a storyteller at heart, and I just wanted to tell stories that matter to me,
Mm-hmm.
like 73, or like Olympic Pride, American Prejudice, the story of 18 African Americans who defied Hitler and Jim Crow to participate in the 1936 Olympics. So those were of interest to me, and that's where I wanted to put my energy and my time.
So talk a little bit about your first documentary film in terms of production, Versailles. Did you traveled overseas to make part of the film?
Absolutely. It's a funny story. So when I decided I wanted to do this film, I called Stephen Burrows, who was one of the designers in the film. And I actually, for some odd reason that day, he picked up the phone, and I said, hi, my name's Deborah Riley Draper, and I'm a filmmaker. This is the first time I'd ever said those words out loud. And I told him that I wanted to do a film about this amazing event that he participated in 1973, the Versailles fashion show. And he said, well, okay, that's great. So when are you going to be here? I said, oh, my crew will be in New York in a couple of weeks. Why don't we nail down a date and we can start interviewing you right away? And he gave me the date and I hung up. I didn't have a crew. I didn't have a camera. I didn't have
Mm.
a cash. I was like, but I've got a subject for my documentary. And so, and I started calling all my friends. I was like, hey, I'm doing this film. I need a crew. And everybody really supported us. So we shot in New York. We shot in Paris. We shot in the legendary Versailles, of course, because that's where the event took place in 1973. And I wanted both the American designer perspective and the French designer perspective, as well as to be in the venue itself. So we were able to shoot literally where the fashion show had taken place 40 years
Wow.
earlier.
Wow. That is absolutely amazing. And so your advertising background, I feel like as I've watched part of your journey, that really has had an impact on your ability to have unique approaches to distribution. I think I don't know, I believe it was Versailles. You mentioned that you actually had a distribution deal with the prison system. How do you come up with these kind of unique ways to get your work out there?
Well, we had several different deals, and with Olympic Pride, what happened? It was with that film that we worked with Kukalaris, and I was in their work in progress program. So they used that film as part of a communication program with first time offenders to be able to
Okay.
introduce them to history and introduce them to images in Black history. So Versailles was distributed, the first time it was distributed was sponsored by Tiffany's, and I do think my marketing may have played a role in that. But we were able to get this film distributed across the globe, in the United States and in Europe and in New Zealand and in Australia. We were part of the Elle magazine Fashion Week in Croatia, which I went, which was fabulous. We opened Fashion Week with this film in New York. We opened Fashion Week in Toronto, sponsored by Joe Fresh. We opened Fashion Week in a couple of other cities as well. So we're able to leverage the fashion aspect and connect it with brands so that they can sponsor these very interactive screening sessions with people who loved fashion. You know,
So
did I
now,
lose you?
nope, I can still hear you. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So one of the things that is very unique about your filmmaking journey, specifically with your second film, Olympic Pride, American Justice, or American Prejudice, you had a film and then you got a book deal. Most people take books and make them into films. How did that come about? Because the book was recently released, correct?
Yes, here's crazy, right? Here's the book, Olympic Pride, American Prejudice, right there. It was also the name of the documentary. Simon and Schuster, the publisher, saw the documentary, and Blair Underwood, who was the narrator of my documentary and the executive producer, had already released like 6 books on Simon and Schuster previously. So he exposed them to the film, and they were like, "This would make a great book. Do you have any research?" And I was like, "We researched for 4 years. We have tons of research that didn't make the film. Obviously, the film's only 90 minutes. So 400 pages later was the book. And it is strange to be able to have a film go from film to book instead of book to film. But
Right?
I think that's the way the world is changing, Angela. I don't think we follow what was the norm any longer. I think we can create our own pathways and create different ways for us to leverage our intellectual property to create different streams of revenues for ourselves as creators, right? So yeah,
Right.
normally people go from book to film. We went from film to book. So and we love that. The book came out in the middle of the pandemic, right before. So I just finished CBS this Saturday with Michelle, and I was at 30 Rock doing NBC4, and then like 4 days later, I got back to Atlanta. It was shelter in place, so we never actually finished our book tour. So hopefully, we'll resume the book tour after the pandemic because it was only out 3 weeks before it was shelter in place.
Oh, wow. Now, your latest project, you did a short film called Illegal
Yes.
Rose. Jasmine Guy was in that project. Talk a little bit about that film, because that was different from the full length
Jasmine Guy
documentaries
plays.
that we were used to.
Yes. You know what? There was a day, and Angela, I know you would probably remember this day as well. I was watching the news, and it was the day they showed San Antonio, Texas, and they had all the children under the viaduct in a cage. The ICE
Yeah.
had rounded up a lot of children and separated them from their parents. And so as a result, I decided to do a short film starring Jasmine Guy called Illegal Rose. And it's about a woman who accidentally kidnaps an ICE detention center runaway on the 4th of July. So we can look at politics, so we can look at brown people and our relationship to immigration and immigration's relationship to us. Because so often when people have the conversation of immigration, they never include Black people. And if you look at the detention center in Georgia, there are a ton of Black people in the detention center from the Bahamas, from Jamaica, from Africa, from up and down the diaspora, including the Caribbean. So we aren't in that conversation. So I wanted to put us in that conversation and to have us play a role, but also send up a signal that we're watching and we see what's happening with immigration and we don't like it. And we're not silent about it either.
And so that film has made you've done the festival circuit with it.
Yes, we're doing the festival circuit. Pandemic, no festivals. So, but in the DTLA festival, the downtown LA festival, Jasmine Guy won Best Actress in the festival. So we were on a great trajectory, getting accepted into festivals, winning a couple of them. We had a great kickoff at the Bronze Lens in Atlanta. So we're really excited about the film. We're going to go ahead and release it digitally in the next couple of weeks, because I don't know if how the festivals are going to come back and innovate. So we're going to go ahead and put it out on the digital platforms. But we love that film. There was a little 8-year-old girl who played the runaway, who's an actress from Atlanta, who was fantastic. And Jasmine was this amazing woman who, she was a nurse, and she wasn't really political at all. But this little girl changed how she looked at immigration and changed how she looked at the world and how she wanted the world to look back at this little girl. So it's a touching story and beautifully acted.
Awesome. Now you're working on a lot of projects right now. You're actually waiting for the green light, literally, to be able to get to set on some projects that you already had lined up before all of this happened. Which ones can you talk about?
I can talk about a couple. So you and Angela, you know this. So Coffee Will Make You Black is one of my favorite books of all time, written by the amazing April Sinclair, about this super smart Black girl in the 1960s and how she deals with race, colorism, genderism against the backdrop of the civil rights in the South Side of Chicago. So we're in the middle of casting, and we're working on that film. Right now, the film has some cast already attached. Coffee Will Make You Black will star Gabrielle Union. It's produced by Octavia Spencer, and we're signing on more cast right now over the course of the summer, as we get used to Zoom auditions and all, and the different ways we're going to be auditioning folks. So that's really exciting. I'm excited by the script. Tate Taylor is also one of the producers as well. I'm excited by the team. It's a beautiful story. It's a coming of age of a Black girl, and we see a lot of Stand By Me. We see a ton of coming of age stories, but very rarely do we get to see one about a super smart Black girl from a 2-parent household who gets straight A's, who's got this interesting array of friends, and it's the 1960s. And she's looking at how Black America is changing and how America itself is accepting that. And I think that's relevant to right now, because major change is happening in this country, and people are not here for it. They are not here for equality. They're not here for all the voices. They are still carrying the vestiges of slavery and Jim Crow with them into 2020. You know, they won't let go. You can't even bird watch in peace, you know?
So, all of your films, every project that I am aware of, has really had this underlying theme of uplifting uh, marginalized people, mainly people of color, um, but uplifting marginalized communities. And even the name of your company, Coffee Bluff Pictures, has that deeper meaning. Talk about the name of your company and where that came from.
I very proudly talk about the name of the company Coffee Bluff Pictures. Coffee Bluff, the river, there's several amazing things about it. But my family grew up in Coffee Bluff, which is an enclave outside of Savannah, Georgia, where the slaves from the Wallburg plantation in St. Catharines came after they were freed. So my grandmother lived on Coffee Bluff Road. The river everyone was baptized in was the Coffee Bluff River, and that area was a, just an amazing place as a child to be a part of. So you had all these wonderful people who nurtured you, and in this community of all Black people, you were so special and so loved, and it was so close knit. And obviously my family had lived there and still lives there since the 1800s. And it's very special to me. It's a place of inspirations. It's where I first learned how to read. So it means everything in the world to me. So that's why the company is called Coffee Bluff Pictures.
All right, you have a question from one of our viewers. I want to go ahead and make sure we get to that. I don't forget it.
Yes, Joanne. Do you think you will look into a documentary on what is taking place with people of color losing their lives at the hands of law enforcement? I don't know if I'm going to take that documentary on directly, Joanne, but I'm working on a documentary with Amy Allison, who's the founder of She the People. And She the People is a nonprofit that actually looks at women of color and their political power and their political strength and criminal justice reform, and how we can literally change who's in office so we can change legislation and we can change policing and how policing shows up in our community. Their goal is to get 1 million women of color this year registered and voting, in addition to the folks that are already registered. I'm working on that project with Terry J. Vaughn and Cass, so that's super exciting. And it'll take a look at all of the things that are happening in 2020, which unfortunately includes the loss of life over and over and over again, and the threat of loss of life. Because in the case of Christian Cooper, it wasn't a loss of life, but it was the threat of loss of life. And he's a creative. He spent his life working in advertising agencies, just like me. He's in Central Park, bird watching. And the day that bird watching becomes a threat and a Black person can potentially lose their lives, we have to shine a light on these types of things, but we also have to shine a light on the underlying symptoms, and that's the structure and the institutional racism that has been in place and continues to be in place because the right people aren't in office to dismantle it permanently.
So,
thank you
Deborah,
for your question.
Yes, and she just responded. Deborah, what advice do you have for someone who may be interested, particularly in documentary films? I talked with a film mentor because I have been sticking my toe in the directorial field, and I spoke with a mentor about documentary films and almost the importance of having, what I was told is you almost need to have it sold before you even make it, before you even start production. What advice would you offer someone who's interested in telling a story?
Well, you know what? I've never had anything sold in the documentary space before I made it. You know, that I've not had that luxury yet. On the feature side, uh, my feature is, but on the documentary side, I was inspired to make something and I got to making it. And I figured, here's the thing, right? With the democratization of film on the documentary side, if you get the money together to make your film, you can put it on Amazon Prime yourself. You
Right.
you can put it on YouTube yourself. You can create a Zoom screening of it yourself. You know, if you have an iPhone, you are on your way to making a film. Hold it steady. Think about your shots. Read all the books you can read on directing and filmmaking so that the composition of your shots look amazing. But there's so many great stories to tell. And we need more people of color telling them right away. We, I don't like to tell people about the hurdles. We know there are hurdles. Everything we do, there's a hurdle in front of us. There's nothing we can do
Yes.
in this world that there are not 20 hurdles in front of us to get to the finish line. But that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. It's fine. And there will be hurdles in that space. But Angela, for you, as a storyteller, as an actress, as a producer, a writer, this is the perfect next step for you to tell a story. In Atlanta alone, there's so many crazy stories across the world. There are, and your voice is really important behind the camera, as are every other young person who wants to do it, because we have a disproportionate number of untold stories and a disproportionate number of non-represented content about our stories, about our experiences, about our communities, marginalized and not marginalized. So I encourage everyone, even if you're making a 5-minute iPhone shot documentary about Angela Ray herself, do it. You know what I mean? Call on the phone and say, I want to make a documentary about you and where you've come from and where you're going and what you've been through to get you here. And that 5-minute documentary will be your stepping stone to the 10-minute version, the 15-minute version, a theatrical version. But you have to start. And, you know, I didn't go to film school. So I had to take classes. I was reading everything. I went to workshops. Obviously, I had, you know, a decade plus of commercial production experience in my background, but really understanding the story and the craft of story and the craft of directing. I spent time really learning and teaching myself and making mistakes and making more mistakes and benefiting and learning from those mistakes, right? Because you
Mm-hmm. So, what we know that, hopefully when it's safe to go out in groups again, you're going to resume your book tour. And congratulations to you on that, because I think I did see the advertisement for your, I guess it was a Saturday this morning. Was it CBS this morning, but on Saturday for Olympic Pride, American Prejudice. Then Coffee Will Make You Black. You'll be going into production for that.
Yes, we Blair Underwood, my executive producer, and I had the opportunity to sit down with Michelle on CBS this morning, Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
literally right before New York was shut down for the pandemic. So we sat down and we talked to her about the book. We talked about the documentary. We talked about the relevance, Angela, to right now, about
Mm-hmm.
how 1936 looks so much like 2020.
Yes.
1936, an election year. 1936 was a year where a lot of Black men were lynched. 1936 was a year where 18 Black people in particular had to prove that they were citizens and not
Mm.
second class citizens, prove that they earned the right to wear the USA on their back during an Olympic year and still be marginalized and still be discriminated, even on top of winning gold medals and proving that they were equal. They were still subjected to inequality and not having access and not having equity in the American dream. Because, you know, we not only want equality, we want equity as well. So
Yes. How does networking impact what you do? Because you have been able to worked with some very talented, influential, and well-established people in the entertainment industry. Was it through networking? Was it through your background in advertisement? What's the secret sauce?
Um, Certainly, a lot of the crew that I worked with, I know from my advertising agency days for sure.
Okay.
Even I know Jasmine Guy from my advertising agency days because she worked on a brand project. That's how we met. So fast forward years later, when I was looking for an actress, was able to call her on the phone because we had that relationship from a campaign that she did before. So it was really wonderful. I think some of it comes from networking, some of it comes from relationship building in general. I think it also comes from making sure that people know that you work hard and that you'll work hard for them and that you're a good collaborator and that you're going to do what you say you're going to do and that you believe in a great product, a great story, and that you're going to work hard for it and you're going to fight for it. And I think that's part of the law of attraction as well.
Yeah.
But you have to find. I've worked with the same DP, and you have to find the tribe that you jive with. Like because
Oh, I love that.
Angela, being on set is arduous. You got to be with folks a long time, all day, and it's tiring. So you want to be with some folks you really, really enjoy being with because this is a long, hard road,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And plus you want to be able to network. You and I have networked a couple of times on being in the same place at the same time, working on community service related things, not even necessarily related to acting or producing, but related to
Right.
giving back is actually how we met.
Right. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So and yeah, so one of these days we'll be Deborah and Angela working on something together.
Absolutely. Yeah, looking forward to that. Definitely looking forward to that. So, any final thoughts? Definitely, I just want to say for again, thanks for you all who are on the broadcast tonight. Thank you to all of you who are checking this out on the replay. Connect with Deborah on her Instagram. It is scrolling at the bottom of the screen. And also you can connect with her on her website, coffeebluffpictures.com. Deborah, any final remarks? Anything, that you want to share that maybe I forgot to cover?
You're very thorough, so you covered everything. I think I would share with people to stay encouraged and stay inspired. We're in the middle of a pandemic and it's hard and it's tough and it stifles your creativity in so many ways. But
Mhm.
we don't want people to forget that this too shall pass, and it's going to be gone, and you're going to want to make sure that you took great care of yourself during this time and that you nurtured yourself and your relationships and your creativity.
What has been your go-to practice? You mentioned nurturing. For me, I think it's been extra sleep. And I also participated in a 21-day meditation challenge, which just came at the perfect time for me during this pandemic. But what's been your kind of go-to practice that's kind of helped you stay grounded and taking care of your emotional well-being?
I actually like to just listen. I made these playlists on Spotify, and I
Mhm.
really love these lists that I made, and to sing out loud to them and to dance to them and to go for walks. That's been really, really, really helpful. But yeah, I will bust a move in the living room in a minute, and that is really therapeutic.
Shout out to DJ D Nice because I know that D Nice, I don't know if you follow him, but that first night when he hit 100,000 followers, I was listening that night and he was jamming. So yeah, like you, music has definitely helped. I was walking a lot until they closed the parks. near me, and that was a blow when they first closed the parks, and I totally understood why. I'm not one of those who like, why are you closing my park? I pay taxes. So I definitely understood why. But I have really some really beautiful parks that I are walking distance to where I live that overlook the Chattahoochee River, and that was my go-to thing. And so when that was taken away, I was like, oh boy, how are we going to get that release that I normally do now? So just curious. I'm always looking to take notes from other people. But yeah, you're right. Music is a universal healing language. I definitely believe that.
It is 100%.
Well,
100.
Deborah, I look forward to seeing what coffee will make you black will entail. Best of luck to you as you get to do production again. I know that as I've been watching the trades on what's going on with all of the unions trying to come together to make sure that everyone is going to be safe once we do return to work. I know this is probably different from any time in our industry's history. So but I look forward to seeing what this final product is going to be. It's exciting.
Thank you so very much. And I'm just proud to be able to contribute work that people like you, Angela, are looking forward to, and work that we can all be proud of and discuss and can inspire and create something positive inside your soul. So that's the
Yeah.
gift I want this work.
Yeah, you were just talking earlier about Olympic Pride being a part of teaching, inmates Black history. Since all of your projects are just have so much historical relevance, have you considered maybe having them as a part of university or grade school curriculum?
It's a great question. We're working right now. We it's so amazing. We're working with a professor at Morehouse College right now to create a curriculum and a special class for Morehouse. The film screened at Morehouse in the Human Rights Film Festival, and one
Okay.
of the psychology professors film, and she reached out about helping to create a curriculum, as well as there is a professor at Montclair State in New Jersey that's also working with us to create a curriculum for a select number of HBCUs. So you're right on point.
Okay. All of a sudden, I was like, wait a minute, like this, just the, like I said, the historical nature of what you're doing and the positive historical nature. I mean, you definitely have an eye for these stories that are untold. And I feel like I've been coming across some of those stories. So I may be giving you a call just to get your advice as I step, a little bit more into that world.
Come on in.
All
We're
right. Well,
waiting
Deborah,
for
thank
you.
you. Hey, you know what? I think it's about that time. It's about that time. So, well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know that even though we are sheltering at home, so many creatives have a lot on their plate. And you're juggling multiple things while you're working at home. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to share with us tonight and closing out this series on women behind the lens. All right.
Appreciate you,
Well, have
Angela. I'll see you soon.
absolutely have a great evening. All right. Again, that is Deborah Riley Draper, multiple award winning documentary filmmaker, short filmmaker. She is now an author and she does have a new project coming out. Well, they're going to be in production very soon. And that's it for this Friday edition of The Angela Ray Show. I just want to remind you, as always, as we close out, of Ray of Motivation number 54. Cleaning a mirror does not change the person who is reflected in it. Until next time, I encourage you all to go out and be the change.